There too. Hey guys, my name is Eva Palakava. I'm the co-founder and co-owner of Blooming Beats Kitchen, and this is our weekly Facebook Live. This is Vanessa Tavernetti. I'm gonna let her introduce herself in a minute. I just want to give you a little bit of background on what we're doing here. So every Monday, I bring you an amazing expert in the field of healthy lifestyle, or a naturopath, or a doctor, or somebody from the field of psychology, anything that relates to wellness, and we have a very interesting conversation about topics that sometimes we don't talk about, sometimes controversial topics, depends, but today we're talking about primal lifestyle, and I've seen Vanessa present. She's amazing, and I was really impressed, and I got a lot out of it, so I invited her to be here. And Vanessa is the owner and co-founder of Earth Magic Academy, and she has lots of degrees and titles. So why don't you give us a little bit of background of who you are and how did you come to be who you are and do what you do?
Great, thank you, Eva. I'm really grateful to be here, and I'm grateful for your restaurant. When we moved to Boulder, we were thrilled to find out that such a place existed. Because being in the world and being a sensitive human, it's interesting sometimes to try to go out for dinner and try to find things that we can eat and feel good about and that nourishes us on a very deep level. So thank you for your commitment to offering such a place, and also for these Facebook Lives conversations that's really, I think, triggering some things in people to make them look at their lives, think differently, question things. So thank you for your integrity.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah. I started on this journey as a child. Really, I was a very sensitive child, and I communicated with the outside world. I communicated with the trees and the birds, and coming from a very strict Catholic family, that was a really interesting position to put myself in and to choose to come into that family in this way. And it took me years to understand that I wasn't crazy, and that there's a lot of people out there, you might be one of them, that have these connections and can hear and see and feel things that may not be in quote unquote the real world, but for a lot of us it is the real world. And so as a child I really went into it, but then as I was a teenager, I had this picture perfect life. I was like captain of the soccer team, and I was on the honor roll and on homecoming court, and had the good boyfriend and all of these things, but there was a part of me that was really desperately missing. And that was this acknowledgement and this guidance and these highly sensitive skills that I had. And so as a young child, I started to drink, and I did drugs, and I was very promiscuous.
As a young child? Oh my gosh.
Like 11 years old is when I started on that path, just to deal and to try to come up with some sort of way to operate in my life with these special skills. Or unique skills, I'll call them, because I don't think they're that special. I think most people have them. It's just that we have turned them off for various reasons. And so it's a matter of coming back into connection with them. And so when I was 20, this went through all through high school, all through college, and then when I was 23, a couple weeks after my golden birthday, I had a near-death experience. And I was in a coma for 7 days, and when I was in that coma and I came out of that coma, I had a very clear message that I needed to help people connect to the earth through the food that they ate and the medicine that they took.
Wow.
And so I started off on that journey, and I first started off trying to convince farmers in the Midwest that they needed to go organic, and as a 23-year-old woman, that was a really difficult position to put myself in.
Wow.
And so eventually I found out about the school garden movement, and I started a few gardens in the greater Chicago area. and they got tilled under because the custodial staff said, hey, we don't grow food at schools. This was 20 years ago. I mean, right now, school gardens are very popular and are very much, a norm in a lot of public school curriculum. Mm-hmm. And so I transported myself out to the San Francisco Bay Area, and I started to work with Alice Waters at a school in Petaluma, California, which after 17 years, that school garden is still going. Wow. Because I said we have to change the marketplace. And so we will go after the kids. And we will change the way they think about food, and we will change the way they taste food, and we will have their taste buds desensitized from hot Cheetos into what a real, organic, from the earth radish tastes like.
Wow.
And so I still am a part of that world. I train about 50 teachers each summer at an ecology center in California on how to best work with children in school gardens. So that's part of my existence in this world. I met my husband 12 years ago, and he had a very similar story. However, he had been diagnosed with ADHD. And what we had found out when we were dating was that a lot of the things that had kept me alive during those teenage years were the same things that had kept him alive and thriving, and that was with our connection to nature and this communication with nature. So he is also gifted in that way. Mm-hmm. So about 5 years ago, we came together and said, hey, what can we do? And so right now we offer healing enrichment programs for children with ADHD and are otherwise sensitive, and we work with the entire family, because as we have seen, what I saw in the school garden is you can show the children the kale, you can cook the kale with them, but if there's no co-relationship with that kale going home, it falls on deaf ears. And so really the healing process really needs to be something that the whole family participates in.
Wow.
So I feel really blessed that I am able to offer these services and provide my gifts to families, and sharing my passion, really. So that's a little bit about my story. We are very excited to work with families one-on-one is really where we see the most gain and improvement of health. And so we go in and we focus a lot on diet. And we believe that there's not one shoe fits all, one size fits all with diet, that paleo might work with some people and gluten-free might work with other people, but really it's taking a look at each individual and seeing where their body is and what their constitution is and working with what is best for them individually. So that's a little bit about how we work with families.
Gotcha.
Uh-huh.
Let's talk about gluten, because we talked about it a little bit.
Yes.
And you made a comment about don't throw the baby out with the bathwater or something like that. So I want to know more about that.
Yes. Well, I grew up in the middle of corn and soybean country, right in the middle of central Illinois. And before I was 30, I knew 40 different people that had died of strange and unusual cancers. And I really got to start to look at industrial farming and conventional farming and subsidized farming and what was going on in that world. I actually even went and got my master's degree from the University of Illinois in genetics to understand from the genetics point of view of what GMO is, so that I could speak intelligently against it. And so during that time, what I learned was how much of the subsidized farming is really providing an overproduction of food in this country, and that a lot of the corn and a lot of the soybeans and a lot of the wheat is being stored in silos for very long periods of time in not the best conditions. So a lot of the people in this country that are experiencing the gastro issues with gluten are actually having reactions to the mold from the wheat, from how it's being stored, and from how long it's being stored.
Wow.
So
I didn't know that.
I have been actually poisoned by mold a couple times in my life and have gone down that role, not from food, but from housing situations. And so I've gotten to really look at how mold affects the human body, and then I've been able to make correlations with clients that we work with and say, that's not really a wheat issue, that's really a mold issue. And I have other colleagues that have then therefore gone to Europe, let's say, and have eaten gluten in Europe that has been grown and produced in Europe and have had no problem at all. So again, I think with like the diet where it's not one size fits all, I think that's true with gluten, that you really need to look at where is the product coming from, how is it grown, and how is it being affected in your body. There's a lot of people in Colorado that are growing wheat that are kind of on the same kick. There's a gentleman, I forget the name of his company, but he's at the Boulder Farmers Market, and he has locally produced organic wheat. And so our family is starting to like introduce some of that wheat into our diet to see like how do we react? Do we have an inflammatory response, or is it something different? So
Are you having any?
I have not gone there yet because I'm detoxing some mold currently, so I'm like one thing at a time. My husband and my child, who normally are very sensitive to gluten, have been able to eat the gluten and not have the crashes with the gluten. So
How interesting.
it's very interesting. I'm like, go to the Boulder's Farmer Market and find the guy selling pasta.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. I have not heard that before. That's really cool. But how do people know? How do you, when you test them, how do you know if they're sensitive to the gluten or the mold?
It's really case by case, and it's eating it and how do you feel? You know, I think there's tests that you can take, but when you're dealing with specific products from specific purveyors and farmers, that you really need to take that risk and say, you know, am I in a well enough place that I can do a little bit of an experimentation? Or, you know, it's all based upon how you're feeling at this time. It's something that I look forward to trying once my body has recovered from the mold a little bit more.
Yeah.
Mold is real, and take very strong precautions against mold. A lot of people blow mold over, and especially in Boulder after the flood, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, the house has mold, but it really affects your nervous system and your digestive system, and it's a neurotoxin, so it goes all the way through.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Yeah, it's a little side note.
Yeah, I've never had a problem with it, but I hear a lot of people who come here have been dealing with it for a while.
Right.
So I wanna get a little bit more into the primal lifestyle in connection with nature.
Yes.
Because we all know we should be in nature, and that's part of the lifestyle. We should be walking barefoot. We should be connected to earth. We should be, you know, digging in earth, and we know the health benefits of it. I think a lot of people in the primal paleo world understand that there's a benefit to their gut and bacteria and things like that. But I would love to hear from your perspective, what's the benefits and how do we go about connection to nature?
Great. Awesome. I love talking about that. I think first of all, what we really need to understand and come to peace with is that we are not separate from the earth. Is it a low battery?
Okay, all right.
We'll keep going. We are not separate from the earth. We are a part of the earth. So we are the same as everything else that's out in nature. And I think that's a huge thing to actually sit with. You know, we are mammals, and we were biologically made to adapt with nature. And every system in our body is related to the earth's vibration. And so when we feel like all stressed out because we're in the buildings with the twinkly lights, or we're on our phones too much, that is not nature. And so one way to quickly bring yourself back into balance is to go outside and, like you said, like put your naked skin on the earth, your feet. And like, how do you do that in the winter? Take your gloves off and go touch a tree. You don't have to hug the tree, but just to reset, because that negative charge that is coming from the planet immediately balances all of our positive charges that we get through emotional stress, the technology, all of the frequencies that are flying around. So that's one really, really simple thing, is to just go out in nature and sit and just be with nature. It's interesting, in Boulder, when we first got here, everybody's outside, but everybody's running and biking and walking, but that's different and that's valuable, and it's important to go outside and to breathe fresh air, but that's very different than actually sitting and being with nature. Being in and being with. Those are two very separate things. And so we really, really encourage people to take the time to unprogram, and like, you know, sitting on the rock on your phone is not the best combination. Like, just take that 5 minutes. It doesn't take long. Like when we work with children, we start with 2 minutes. And we just go from 2 minutes and then gradually increase in time increments, and we try to get them to 20 minutes. 5 years ago, when I got really sick with mold for the first time, I had committed to a practice that I learned from John Young, and he's part of like Coyote Mentoring. There's a whole like primitive skills and nature connection school that he is a part of, and it's called a sit spot, and you go to the same exact spot every day if you can, and you try to sit there for, you know, you designate your time, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. And so for 2.5 years I sat at the same spot. I might have missed maybe like 5 days within that 2.5 period of time. And I sat with a bay tree in the California redwoods, because that's where we lived at the time. And it was amazing what had happened to my inflammation during that time. And I cannot say that it was only the bay tree and only the sit spot, because I was doing other things, but what my doctor had said at that time, a functional medicine Western doctor, he's like, whatever you're doing, it is incrementally increasing your healing from other cases that I'm following. And I am convinced that it was because of that healing aspect that nature brings in as well. Okay. Yeah.
I got stuck on something.
Uh-huh.
I think this is really, really cool. I got stuck on the positive negative charge.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we, as you know, as nature, like when you go to the beach, for instance, and you know, immediately as you breathe in that salt air, that has a negative charge in the air. The salt has in the water have a negative charge to it. So that's why everyone says, oh, I just need to go to the beach to feel better. Well, this exact same thing happens when you put your naked skin on the earth, because the earth, no matter where you are, as long as it's not covered with concrete, has that same charge. I think people might feel it more strongly when they're at the earth. And so that can really help, because the positive charges in our body is what can promote disease in our body. And that, like, go, 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 stress, 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 that's all positively charged electrons in our body. And so that's one, I think, awesome relationship that we have with the earth, that it can be immediate.
So you don't get that even if you're running on the trails and you have rubber shoes.
You don't, and that's what is sorely missed. And like, they make like earthing shoes. Some of you out there in the audience, raise your hand if you have them, might have seen some of the shoes, and there's a copper connection. There's a great movie called Earthing Alaska, where a gentleman did an experiment in a small town in Alaska where there were like 200 people, and after getting them to do this earthing process, where just putting your naked skin on the ground for like 20 minutes a day, heart disease went down, diabetes went down, their cancer rates all went down just by having that daily influx. It's like a vitamin. It's like the earth vitamin.
So you're basically grounding yourself.
You're grounding yourself. Simple.
Very cool. Could
Yeah.
you ground yourself in sleep? Could you have somebody go from your body through your bed all the way to the ground?
Well, there's these, again, with technology, there's like earthing blankets that you can get in any house that is wired to a grounding rod into the ground, which most houses legally have to have that. If you just plug your blanket into an outlet, you can immediately be grounded. And that's kind of like the lazy way of doing it. But it
cool.
recharges
Except
you.
when there's lightning, then you get you get hit by lightning, but hey.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's just a part of how homes are created, and a lot of people don't know that. So you can have those benefits while you're sleeping. Now, we used to just wire them up and like put them on our child's toes, because our child could be on the autism spectrum. We've never had her diagnosed with that, but we often, when we live in houses that have grounding wire, will put them on her toes after she goes to sleep to ground her, to help her recalibrate while she's sleeping.
How interesting.
It's a whole nother world, earthing.
Yeah.
Check it out if it's
But
interesting
you
to
know,
you.
that makes sense. The human design, how we were designed to live in the first place, is not the way we live now.
Correct.
So this is, yeah, it all makes sense to me.
Right, and I think that's a huge connection to the work that we do and to the work that you promote here in this restaurant with paleo and like primal and primitive lifestyle. Like, they didn't have cars.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't have sneakers.
Doesn't mean that we shouldn't have cars.
No,
right?
it doesn't.
But sometimes, like, make some little tweaks into your lifestyle and do what you gotta do.
Exactly, to bring it back into balance.
Yeah.
I think we can agree that as a human race, we're a little bit out of balance with the connection to our relationship with the earth.
No, totally.
And I don't believe that the earth needs saving. I believe it's the humans that need the saving, and that once we really take seriously our part of being this piece of the earth, and we treat ourselves like that sacred earth vessel, that things with the planet can shift, because we will be more conscious of what we're putting into our bodies, and that can change the marketplace.
I love that. Are you writing a book?
I am writing a book on that.
That is, wow.
Yes, on that specific
By the way,
thing.
she did not tell me that before. But I was like, that topic needs to be covered.
Yes, that, and so what I'm in the book, it's the running title is "Fuck the Planet, Save Yourself," but it might not have the, you know, it might be asterisks and things like that.
Do it.
But it's really like people want to save the whales, and people want to save the dolphins, and people want to save the redwood trees. But when we are more conscious about what we are doing to our bodies, all of those things will be okay. Because we will be changing what we're buying, and we're changing what we're doing, and we're changing what we're purchasing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thank
oh my
you.
gosh. You're just, oh my gosh, I just love you.
I love you too.
What else do you want to talk about?
I have some notes here. I think the other thing I wanted to talk about is just like where we are as a human race. Like, let's get real with some numbers and some statistics that the average American spends 12 hours on screens.
A day?
12 hours a day. And that the average American spends 1 hour outdoors. And the American inmates are required to spend 2 hours outdoors. So the average American is spending less time outside than the American inmate. And like, what a privilege we have to be able to go outside anytime we want, but we're really, as a whole, are not taking advantage of that privilege. And you know, I've worked with children from San Francisco Bay Area to the Chicago metropolitan area, all the way out to Brooklyn and the New York, like the 5 boroughs area. And I would say to, working on a farm or working at a school garden in the redwoods in Northern California is really different than going into the Red Hook neighborhood in Brooklyn, but it doesn't matter because the trees are the same. When you get down to it and you touch one tree and you touch the other tree, they have different messages, they have different lives, they have different interactions with their community, but their vibrations and their energies are just the same. And I'm talking about like the trees that are growing in between the street and the sidewalk. Like, pay attention to those trees. Those trees are doing a lot. And when you walk by them, say thank you, because it's real and they feel that, but they're doing a lot for the humans that they're living with. So that was one thing I wanted to mention. The other thing I wanted to mention that you talked a little bit about was all of the beneficial microorganisms that are in the soil. And so just to go outside and to touch the soil is really important and can drastically improve. So yes, I am a big proponent and encourage people to grow food as much as they can. One, because you know where it's coming from, and you can have a relationship with the plant, but also your digestive system and your nervous system is having a relationship with all of those beneficial microorganisms. And it doesn't need to be on an acre plot of land. It can be in a little container box on your apartment's balcony. Like, my dad lives on the 23rd floor of an apartment building in Chicago, and I really encourage him to grow some flowers and a little bit of herbs every year, just so he's getting those beneficial microorganisms, even though he's living in a very disconnected place on the 23rd floor.
So babies do it like little kids, they do it automatically. They just like stick their fingers into their mouths.
Right.
And from where I grew up, that was normal. You let them do whatever they want to do. Today, in Boulder, a little different story. Everything is over-sanitized. Everything has to be super clean. And I wonder what the impact is on those kids.
Well, we see it. And actually, there was a school in Oakland that was bringing in buckets of soil daily into the school to have the children play with them.
Really?
And just to see how much effect it had on their brains and their ability to ground and to stay more present with their schoolwork. And that's another thing that we've been promoting, for instance, in the classes that I've been teaching at the Ecology Center, is taking the children outside and actually creating time outside of the Common Core and outside of the state standards to connect with nature. Because when they can ground and they can have that peacefulness running through their nervous systems, they're able to go further and deeper and have better focus with their learning. So like, for instance, we worked with a school in Palo Alto, and like parents freaked out because, their kids got to go to Harvard. Their kids got to get the grades, and why are you taking 10 minutes out of the day for my kid to go talk to a tree? That's outlandish. But over that year, what we were able to see with those children really made a difference.
Wow. That is something. That is really cool. I had no idea that was happening.
Yes. So those are a lot of the things I wanted to talk about today.
What about your quote?
Oh, the quote. I wanted to, thanks. This is from Jonas Kepler, who was a big foundational influence for Isaac Newton, who said, "The diversity of the phenomenon of nature is so great, precisely in order so that the human mind shall never be lacking in fresh nourishment." And I think that that's one of the biggest things we see with children is that, the mother will say, fix my kid, and my kid doesn't eat vegetables. But when the children have a direct relationship to growing their food or growing their herbs, they are more enticed to try different things. And, again, in a very low economic area, we were making collard wraps with children. And we with rice, and I think we had bacon in there too, but we couldn't even get the collards from the garden to the station where we were making them into the wraps, because they were just eating the collards and raw collards. And I think across America that there is a drastic nutrient deficiency happening with people, but especially with children, and it goes across economic lines. So whether you live in a low-income house or a very wealthy house, children are malnourished. And I think we really need to look at their relationship with the earth and how they can develop a better connection with the food that they're eating.
That's so interesting. When you said that, I went back into my childhood memories, and my grandpa used to grow a lot of stuff in our garden.
Right.
And to me, it was always like a treasure hunt.
Yes.
Like, what can I find? What can I pull out of the ground? There was radishes and strawberries and everything, and lettuce and cucumbers that taste so different when you pick them off the plant versus when you buy it in the store.
Exactly.
Is it so exciting? It's fun for kids to be picking stuff from the garden.
It's so true.
And I didn't even realize it's so true. Like, it's exciting, it's fun. Like getting vegetables from the store.
Right. Not so fun. I mean, some kids like to shop, but when you go out there, it is like a treasure hunt.
Yeah.
And then it's a relationship. You have to go back, and you have to water, and you have to look for little aphids, and you have to take care of that plant. And it's really teaching people to have that connection with the earth again, which is really having a connection with themselves. Because again, we're not separate. So taking care of their food is taking care of themselves.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, so I wanted to ask you, I know you don't have a lot of room for climbing because you're so popular these days, but what are you up to? What you're creating in your business?
Well, we had gone from offering like week-long camps and weekend camps or a day off of school camps. And then we also offered VIP programs where we would go into the home and work with the whole family. So we would go into the home and look at each individual, look at your diet, make tweaks here and there, clean out the cupboards of anything that had any like red dye number 40 or artificial ingredients, because we've noticed a huge difference with the children that we work with just in removing artificial dyes and artificial flavors alone. And then we coach those families into having more nature connection built into their everyday routines. And so those are our like highlighted programs. But what has been happening is we've been getting more interest across the country. And although it's just my husband and I running these programs right now, we figured, how can we balance the need that is out there for people to have these skills and these techniques to connect. So we're in a very exciting developmental stage right now where, consequently enough, which is interesting, that we are going to be doing more online programs, and perhaps with the option of a visit from us as well, like built into the program. We're also working on like a family camp where families come and immerse themselves for a couple of weeks, like a vacation of sorts, but really diving into wellness and self-care and diet and nature connection. So I'm offering today for everybody to visit our website. Please be patient. We are earth people. We are not technology people yet, and so be patient with our website. It's in reconstruction, but sign up for our newsletter so you can figure out, if you want to learn more from us or just see what we're doing and learn little tips here and there about how you can be more connected.
Will you post the website under the video?
I will.
Okay, so if you're watching a replay, then it's posted underneath. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're such a wealth of information. I just love being around you. You're one of these people with the most amazing energy, and thank you for being here, and thanks for sharing. Thanks for making a difference with these people.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for listening.
And for you guys, I think next Monday, if I'm not wrong, we have Mary Kate Irving coming, which you all know because she talks hear quite a bit about keto, paleo, which is one of my favorite topics. So next week you get to find out a little bit more about that.